Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Katlyn Boucher, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Katlyn is a professional healer, spiritual guide, Waldorf teacher, and new mama. She supports parents and educators to create shifts within their family and community by beginning with themselves and their own healing. And today she's here to share her birth and postpartum story. Let's get into it. Hi, Katlyn. I'm so excited to have you with me today. And it's so great to catch up. I feel like I love seeing where you guys are at in life, and it's been so long.
Thanks. Hi.
So for those of you listening, you'll hear Katlyn's bio before this, but Katlyn was a past postpartum doula client of mine. So I get to snuggle her baby and hang out with her cool self and her husband. So when I was thinking about bringing different people on to tell their stories, I was like, oh, she should totally come on and like tell you just your birth story. I think is like pretty unique and like kind of a cool perspective. And then as your background is like a healer and Brandon's too, like being able to kind of approach the birth idea from a different situation, and after things took a turn, like utilizing those skills to like help control the narrative, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm so excited to like dive into that and have you share. But before we jump into like the actual story, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about like you and your family and like what healing work is, so that people kind of have a gist before we get into your story?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
I was so tickled when you reached out.
Aww.
And okay, so a little bit about me and my work. So
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I am so incredibly blessed that I have my precious, precious peach of a boy. His name's Marcus. And he at this point he's coming up on 11 months in a couple days.
Can't even believe it.
I know, it's wild. And yeah, my husband and I met at a meditation and energy healing like I'll say like conference, but it was more than that.
Yeah.
But it was about a 5-day long, it was called Healers Academy. 5-day long process. And so actually when we first met, we weren't really big fans of each other. We kind of avoided each other throughout
Oh my gosh.
And it wasn't until after the last there's like a final like ceremony at the end.
Yeah.
And after that, like it's kind of like both of us had our eyes opened a bit more. We were a little more welcoming towards each other, and that grew into this like collegial respect for one another, into a friendship, and then it grew into romance, and it was just this really sweet kind of opening for both
so cool.
of us. Yeah,
I love that.
So yeah, we've been trying to get pregnant for like 8 years. 7 years. It was stressful.
Yeah.
And we did the fertility testing and everything was fine. And, so we're like, what's going on? And Brandon actually was much more, he had a lot more faith about it. He was like, it's just not our timing right now. And I was like, this is math.
Right. He was more like, trusting his gut, and you were probably over here like, science though, guys. Like, come on.
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, cute, but also, So when Marcus finally, when I finally found out I was pregnant, I was like, this is literally a miracle. Like what, I had totally, put out of my mind about being pregnant, and I shifted towards just focusing, all in on my career. So it wasn't,
of course.
That's
the time
right.
that it happens, right?
Of course, yeah, exactly. But so my career started out as a teacher. And I'm from Michigan, and I started out teaching in Detroit. And I found that, you know, largely, I think the children are going to be okay if us adults actually get it together. You know what I mean?
Fair
Like,
enough.
so my initial desire to going into education was to help our future, helping our children. And I was like, wow, like teachers maxed out stressed, parents maxed out stressed. And I was like, it is like the original trickle down effect, you know?
Absolutely.
And so that's when I made this shift about, okay, well, if I want to help others, then first I need to start with myself. And so I started, devoting myself to like my own spiritual journey. And that's what led me into, I ended up finding the Modern Mystery School. Um, and usually when people hear mystery school, they're like, what, right? It's a mystery, right? It's like, what is
Right.
that? And mystery schools, there's 7 of them on the planet, and their charge is to guard the ancient wisdom. And that was something that really sat with me as an educator, because I was like, I love and appreciate knowledge, right?
Right.
And we live in a day and age where knowledge, we're like drowning in it. It's everywhere. And the accessibility, right? To like Google anything.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And and so and that's something that I find to be unique about parenting, is this reconnecting to your own wisdom, right? And to
Right.
your own intuition and your discernment. Um, but a lot of times it has its own filters along the way, because everyone's gone through their own things. And so to be able to have processes like energy healing work, or, like initiations, or, like ascension programs. It's called Kabbalah, which works with the tree of life. It's like to reconnect back beyond all of the masks, all of the stuff and the noise, has been so profound for both myself and for my husband. And so it's actually really cool when I kind of, like, in this moment, like talking with you about this, I'm like, oh, very cool that he and I like connected, right? Like after he and I even started these journeys, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so yeah, so we we had like a healing center in Massachusetts where we were at the time. And and um and we also had come to a point in our marriage where we weren't sure if we could carry on, because our relationship was just, we were just kind of spinning in our own stuff.
Hmm.
Despite all of this focus on this, on ourselves and our healing work, there was something that we just were having trouble with breaking through as a couple. And so we did take some time apart, and in that time apart, there was a lot of self-reflection, right? And we were also turning to our own, like, our support groups, right? Our
Right.
support network. And to just keep doing that deep dive on ourselves, and then going, you know what, maybe we can make this work. And it was after that, and we, kind of recommitted to ourselves, recommitted to one another, and then Marcus came.
It's so crazy.
It's
Like
so
how the
wild to
world
me.
works, right?
I know. It's so
Oh,
just like, wow, okay, whoa. Um, and I think something that was so key about that was, in that time apart, we both underwent some more teachings and trainings on the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And so, honestly, for a woman and for a wife, for me to know my lane in my marriage was very helpful.
fair enough.
Because, and right, because like I did my fair share of trying to keep my side of the street clean, but I didn't really know, right? But I still didn't, I still wanted more. I wanted deeper, and I needed that. And so when I said, oh, like this is where, this is all, keep my eyes on my paper, I have plenty to manage myself, and let him do him, and and trust that. And there's something about when you trust somebody else's um like core essence of who they are, right? that you see more of their goodness come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's
Yeah.
got to be so interesting. So like are all of these like trainings and classes and different types of things that you go through all about like different aspects of, life and the world and all of that, or are they typically all based in like the same type of like quote unquote curriculum?
Um, it reaches a very broad spectrum. And that's something that also drew me in because
Right.
so as like little girl Caitlin, um, always um always felt really connected with God, but like God as in like kind of like formless, like God, universe, creator, goddess, but I didn't really even know what the feminine was because it wasn't represented to me. I
Right.
grew up Christian, so largely, I used to Father God and I didn't see Mother God as much. Um, and so something that I noticed was that like the adults around me would end up just in the world would end up like arguing over what God was and who God was. And it was like, why does it matter? It was like it matters and also it doesn't matter because
Right.
God is and God isn't. Like it's both and he, her, all, right? And so it's this, to be able to find something like the Modern Mystery School that could keep meeting me, where I kept asking questions
Yeah.
and helping me to keep unraveling so that I could keep reconnecting with like who and what God really is outside of me and within me. Because there's a so the Mystery School is it's a Hermetic tradition. So it's like over 8,000 years old. And something that I find very cool about it is that there are, being a Hermetic tradition, there's 7 Hermetic principles, and they're really universal laws. So one of them is the principle of correspondence. And the principle of correspondence is as above, so below, as within, so without. And I see this a lot when we talk about like, when like in our culture today, there's a lot of that, like, the mirroring conversations, right, in relationships,
Right.
right? And so it's like, haha, like there's like like this as one of my teachers in my master's program would say, like subterranean curriculum, right? It's like there is this undercurrent of,
Yeah.
yeah, like underneath this like pop culture stuff, we are referring to things that are actually really ancient.
Right.
And so, so when it comes to that, um, as above, so below, as within, so without, that's reflecting on and who we truly are as spirit, right? Because if God is everything above us, God is also everything within us.
It's
And
just so cool to think about all like the different like you have those moments when you're just like sometimes so overtired and you just start thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm this tiny little fleck on this tiny little space on this earth, and then you just zoom out and all of a sudden you're like, I cannot do that. That's what you start to think about, right? And it
yeah,
is, and I swear, like every parent listening to this right now is got to be laughing with us because I think that that happens the most when you're sleep deprived. And so I think everyone does it.
yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's the perfect conditions, right, to ask like deep existential
Yeah,
questions.
it does. And it just makes you realize, like, whether that's a thing that you do that, like, makes you realize that, like, whatever you're harping on isn't as important as you think it is, or it helps you to, like, ground yourself or whatever it may do.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it's not stressing you out.
Right.
But whatever it may do, it's it's just something that everyone experiences in such a different way, though, right? Like
Yes.
everyone sees things differently, and I think that that's something that you were just kind of mentioning, right? Like
Yeah.
people can experience God or not experience him or her or they, however.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting to kind of hear like another perspective on it, right? Because we hear about, religion and things like that all the time. So to hear like the spiritual side of it is really cool too. So I mean, I feel like we could do a whole episode just on this, but let's dive, okay? So
Yeah, let's do it.
now you take these practices of like trying to, ground yourself and you're practicing and learning and, all these thoughts and questions of like the world, right? And now you're pregnant. So like what does this ideal like birth and bringing child to the world look like for you and for Brandon, I guess, if you want to speak on behalf of him a little bit. And how were you setting yourself up to like have that birth and that initial postpartum period that you were looking for?
It's such a stark contrast, medicine,
I know. I know.
between the
Well, and
two
it's like what was
situations.
right between the hope and what actually
Yes.
happened, y'all will realize here quickly is like very different. But you started off getting what you were hoping for there. So why don't
Yes.
you start with like what how were you planning for this and how were you like because you did do some birth and some postpartum planning because I mean you had hired
Oh yeah.
me as a postpartum doula prenatally. So like what
Yeah.
else was going on as you were pregnant and like preparing for this period?
I think that so what was interesting to me is that it was like once I announced that I was pregnant, I had moms coming out of the woodwork who were like basically like, "Oh, welcome to the club." And I was like, "What is this?" Like I was like,
Oh
like
gosh.
and like and I've but because I've worked with right families for like 2 decades at this
Yep.
point, and and yet to kind of have this like welcome in this way of like, hey, I'm here for you if you ever want to talk about anything, and like, oh, and your experiences might be like da 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 da, and they might be totally different. And I was like, wow, like it was almost like this, just this like secret mom club that like of like and like motherhood. Like I felt like I only saw, even with working so closely with families, um, I only saw like a fraction of
Absolutely.
what motherhood really is. Um, you know, and um and to go a bit meta on that, so it's like, right, for me personally, I would see, for example, like Father God so much throughout my life. And then when it comes to like who is goddess, like who is like Mother God? And like that seemed to always be this question that I always wanted to connect more and more with her. And then as um I became pregnant, I felt even stronger connection, and also there is this definite mystery behind like who is who is mom, right? Who is mother? And also let's like I wanted to learn more about her and all of who she is, because that's also all of who I am, and like and see her more, right? And to see myself more. And so that was kind of a an undercurrent going on. But so oh my gosh. So what I wanted, right, was I wanted to feel supported. I wanted to feel seen, right, by those who are around me, who I love. I wanted to I had to get really clear on what does support look like for me. And I kept getting that
Absolutely.
question asked, and I
Yes.
loved, and like you were so clear with continue to add like what is that like, and like the flavors of that question, right? That I was like,
Right.
right, because it's not just like what's support look like, you're like, oh.
Right. Sometimes, and especially you don't know, like if it's your first baby and we're talking prenatally, or even after you have baby, sometimes you don't know like what can be helpful. So
Yes.
as a postpartum doula coming in and being like, okay, like, do you want to go take a nap and I'll hang out with him? Or like, did you want me to do laundry? Or like, can I go through donations for you? Or can I do dishes for
Yes.
you? Whatever that may be. But sometimes
Yes.
you need options laid out so that you can be like, oh my gosh, you know what? That actually does sound really helpful.
Yes. And like, I mean, right? Women love, I mean, women, I speak for myself. I love choices, right? And I love knowing that like what are my options, right? And what can I pick from? And like,
Right.
what's there. So it and that also took a load off of my own mind, right? Because there's so much that's like coming that shifts and comes in as you become pregnant. And so to just have that like bit of like, somebody knows, somebody can help, somebody can be there, right? So
Yeah.
that was, oh my gosh, that was just so great.
And that was
So
something you were planning for as a whole. Like you had
yes.
this postpartum lined up, but you also had this like birth. It was midwifery styled birth as
Yeah.
well, right? That you
Yeah.
had set up. I was gonna say you had a
Oh,
midwife.
my midwife was amazing. And because I didn't realize how unhelpful Google can be when
Yep.
it comes to about pregnancy questions.
Oh, it's
No clue.
don't Google it.
It was
hire
terrible.
support
Yeah.
and ask them. I always say, don't go to Google. I tell my clients to text me. I'm like, text me.
Oh, right. And so, yep. So like, and having that like the text availability of like of my midwife, and then like after like and like postpartum, having you there to like text back
Yep.
and forth with, it was like, like that is beautiful. And yeah, so having like the hired help to care for, myself and help me with my family development,
Yeah.
was huge. So I had planned for the like the home birth, the home water birth. We had the tub, all set up. Um and yeah, it so first of all, my son, because I was trying to do an all natural birth, um he waited almost. It was 2 weeks and 6 days.
I was gonna say he waited a while. He wanted to hang tight.
He wanted to hang tight.
I remember texting you and being like, "Hey, is everything okay?" Because wasn't your due date got mixed up too, right?
Yeah,
So originally you
because
had an earlier due date because I remember being like,
mhm,
"You're past your due date." And you're like, "Oh, they moved it later." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better for you." But I was like, "Oh my gosh."
because so we realized also that like pregnancy math is different than normal math, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um there was the ultrasound tech, who was amazing. She was such a wonderful woman, and we just would laugh and joke around. Um yeah, she was great. Made everything really, like comfortable, right, in those moments.
Yeah.
And but she estimated a due date, and then but my husband, I knew the date of conception, but we didn't tell it to her midwife until like, I don't know, was it January or February or something? And she was like, "Oh, well, that'll change it." And we were like, What?"
I would do it.
That would do it. So it got changed. And then our son still decided to come when he wanted to
Yep.
come.
Yep.
As babies do. So and for my own like humor with myself, I had no stretch marks on my belly the entire pregnancy until that last 2 weeks and 6 days.
Oh my
I
gosh.
know, and I was like, well, all right, that's fine.
Now, during this, like after you had passed your due date and stuff, you
Yeah,
were planning to have this midwife home water birth.
yeah.
Now, during this time, were you really having to just like trust the process and go with it? Or was there ever like a thought in your mind of being like, okay, we should like try to break my water, or we should maybe get something going to try to like induce the labor? What
We
was that like for you there?
Yeah, so we did some like light trying of
Yep.
inducing. So so we were seeing a chiropractor who
Mm-hmm.
was specialized in helping making sure baby's in the right position, right?
Yep.
So it was like, okay, check, right? And then we were seeing an acupuncturist. So I saw her for a couple of treatments to try and like sort of induce that way. He was still, just not having it. And I was, drinking the teas and having the dates and, just keep prepping my
Yeah.
body, right? Keep doing spinning babies and, going on the walks when I could, kind of, right?
Right.
And my goodness, I also wish that I would have turned off my phone for like those last 3 weeks, because I kept getting all the questions all the time, right? And I love everyone, and also was like, it felt like it's just very quiet, right? Because like he was still moving and everything, and so I knew that
He
everything
was
was
good.
fine. He
Yeah.
was fine, and we're just like, whenever, dude, well, I guess we'll be here. Um, and so my husband and I really capitalized on that time as, let's be extra cozy,
Yeah.
because it was in February into March. And so it's that like slushy kind of in between, right?
Right.
Winter and spring. So we were cozy. We nestled down, we would go, maybe go on a drive, go for walks, but like just really nestly and kind of enjoying the time of just the two of us for like the last bits of time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now he decides he's on his way. What was this process like of him deciding, and what was like that first little while like for you?
Um, it got it's very exciting. Um, because oh my gosh, what was it? There was, I think it was like it feels like it was already forever ago. This is nuts. I think I had like my water like partially broke. It, and I think that there was I went to the bathroom and there was some like spotting.
Hmm.
And then I texted my doula and then I texted my midwife and they're like, okay, yep, all right. So we could be, so like that could have been like the mucus plug and that could have been, so we're kind of still like like, okay, like, we've
Figuring out
been,
what's happening. Yeah.
yeah, we've been on a Marcus watch for a very long time. Maybe we're at a warning stage, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, um, and then the contractions came and as they came, I also had back labor at the same time.
Hmm.
And I had no clue what back labor was. And it was at least as painful, if not maybe more excruciating than the contractions that I had. So it was like at the same time, all around. Um, so I looked at my husband and I was like, I kind of want to go to the hospital now and get like I was like, I think I'm gonna need drugs. And he was like, okay, so I'm gonna go call. Right, I had my birth doula. I was like, right, so he's like, we'll go call Addie. We're gonna bring we're gonna bring her in, right? Because like my husband's amazing, and also it's so hard for him to see me in pain.
Right,
This is
right.
why we have birth workers, right?
Exactly.
Like,
He's so emotionally connected to you, and not that your birth workers and your birth support isn't, but like they see it, they know it. They are also able to keep that rational mind of like, we love you, but this is what you said you want, and like
yes,
help you to give you that push when you need it, obviously, right?
yep,
Um,
yep.
so yeah, so you call and you're experiencing this like around your body compression happening of these
Yeah,
contractions. Yep.
yeah. And so Addie comes within like an hour and then we're just, we're kind of just rolling through it, right? As they roll in. And I'm like, I think that I was in because there's like the pre-labor, right? And there's active labor.
Yep.
So I wasn't in pre-labor for too long. I was in active labor for like, was it 29 hours, I think? And so so uh Addie was there until I think that she came either it was like late at night or early in the morning. Gosh, I can't remember.
It all blurs.
It all blurs. And I bet you that Brandon remembers a lot better because he also has some like EMT training. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I was so grateful that he had all of that too, because he could like uh because in the latter part of my birth story, he was like Johnny on the spot with
He
like
was
being
understanding it, everything.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so yeah, so then eventually, my midwife came and and so we're walking through the paces, right? And slow contractions and whatever. Um and we fill up, then my husband was on managing the tub duty, right?
Nice. Because I'm sure it
Yeah,
gets cold really quickly.
it gets cold really fast. And there's this cozy part of our house that was like we had doors that like, just kind of kept all the heat in too. So he was on, making sure the room was nice and warm and
Yeah.
and then I had like my water and I had, if I needed a popsicle, he had those, all the things that I wanted, right? He was right there and and I had like my birth playlist going that I had cultivated over the last
I
like
love it.
and so so we went through the whole day of just contractions and then going through the night. I, I'm like hoping this kid would come anytime. And I'm getting exhausted. My body's pretty spent. And I would end up kind of nodding off for like 5 minutes, like sitting in the tub where I could only get some comfort and like nodding off for 5 minutes and come back up. And I'm like, wow, it felt like that was an hour. And I was like, that was only literally 5 minutes. And I was like,
Five
oh, okay, great.
minutes.
Let's go.
Now, during this this active labor birthing process while
Yeah.
you're at home and in this tub, did your midwives ever like check you, or were you going without doing any like cervical checks and just kind of just going with it? What was like the plan for that kind of thing? Like, did you know how well you were progressing, or was it really just like a staying in tune with your body kind of feeling?
It was staying in tune with my body. And then after, so so before I started with bearing down, right, to like the final stages of labor, we did a cervical check, just to see how far he was.
Yeah.
And he was still he was still like a, good, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 inches out. So we were like, okay, like, all right, like got the work cut out for us. So let's go in the tub. And I started, I was, bearing down for an hour, and he maybe moved only like half an inch. And that's when so she checked me again, right? And that's when and she was like, that's weird. And I was like, I think so too. Um, and at that point, my body had started shutting down the contractions. And so we had the part of the plan that you never plan for. Um, right. And so, well, I wanted to plan more, but my midwife, God bless her, was like, nope, this is the course. So we're
Right.
going to
Don't
stay
get
the
your head
course.
too far off
Yeah.
track. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, all right, okay. So, but again, it was very simple for me in that moment to be like, you know what, whatever's best for me and the baby, that's it. Boom,
Right.
done. Right.
Right.
Um, and I think that's a choice that many mothers end up making, if not during birth, and at some point, right, throughout motherhood
Right.
is, and
Right.
many times over.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, oh my gosh, I could just hear my husband playing with my son. It's the cutest thing. Um, um, Side note, he's at this point where he starts playing peekaboo with us.
Oh my gosh.
And so he will hide and then he'll pop back out. And then
I
we like celebrate, we're like, there you are, So,
He's so cute.
so
I can't
cute.
believe how big he's gotten.
Yeah, I know he's so big. So anyway,
So he wasn't moving down, and you were like, all
calm
right, I think
down.
it's time to just like to do it. And at this point, like,
Yeah.
as much as you didn't have the plan of like the what if, I'm sure at the same
Yeah.
time you were like, well, the what if is we call an ambulance and we go to a hospital. Like, there's not much
Yeah.
to it, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
so it's
Yeah.
not like you have
Yeah.
to plan that much. Like, at that point,
Really?
like, if you're going to the hospital, it's because medical support's needed. So, like, once
Yeah.
you get there, you have to roll the punches. It's not like
You're
you
just
can be like,
rolling.
well, I'm going to go to the hospital and then I don't want an epidural or I do want this. Like, you don't really know because why are you going there? You don't know yet, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so, so we decided to go. Thankfully, so we lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts. We were 10 minutes from Anna Jacques, or Anna Jakes as it was often. And I was like, but French, Anna
Right.
Jacques.
Right.
Right. Um, so and they have such an amazing staff. And the nurses there were just the perfect people. And I was like, this is brilliant. Thank you,
Yeah.
And Kim, my midwife, came with us the whole time, because she was our advocate with just saying, like, here's everything she's gone through, whatever.
Right. So did you
So
guys drive over then or did you
we
call an
drove.
ambulance? Oh, you
We
did
drove.
drove. Okay.
Yep, because my contractions had stopped, and I had tried to get them back up, but I couldn't get them back up at the frequency.
Yep.
And so it was a quick refuel my body time, like hydrate and have some soup, and then like let's go. Um, so 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 we went, and then when I would like the contractions would start back up when I was like walking in the hospital a little bit, but it was not what they were before. So we, they did like the heart monitor on him, and then they gave me Pitocin, and that started up the back labor worse than it was before, because now I got Pitocin level contractions
Yeah.
going. Um, and so I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we got the epidural, which was also extremely difficult. Took the anesthesiologist like several times before she got the right spot, and it was really painful.
Ugh.
So yeah, so this whole process was just like, what the heck, But at the same time, it was like, um, I am also more than my body. right? So all of this pain I'm going through, like it was an opportunity for me to not dissociate from my body because, right, like I've been through that kind of trauma before where I have been out of my body. And so I really appreciated all of this training that I had had and initiations that I had to help me with like being able to be present
Right.
and like breathe through the pain and like be able to be okay with myself and trust, right? And like
Yeah.
basically kind of like call in the helpers that I needed, right? Like both seen and unseen, because like I felt, I felt angels around me, even though was there in the middle of a hospital, and I was like, and we're here, and this is the mission. This is mother on a mission, right? Is like get through birth with, a healthy baby and a healthy body for me, right? So, um, so his heart rate started dipping and couldn't recoup that well, from the Pitocin because he didn't want to be pushed. That is very much my son. He does. And he was tired. He's been trying this whole time, so I looked at Robin, who was the nurse at Anna Jacques, and she was just this mama bear kind of woman, just amazing. And I was like, yeah, no, let's do a C-section. And they're like, okay, cool. And so we prepped for an emergency C-section. We get in the operation room. And it usually takes, what is it, one doctor, like less than a minute to pull the baby out. And it took 3 doctors, it was 2 doctors and a nurse, 5 minutes to pull my son out. Because he was lodged in my pelvis in a very like specific way. And he had brain bleeds. And so when he came out, he actually was non-responsive. And so at that point, I told, my husband was like, I need to go. And I was like, yep, go be with our son. I'm fine, you know. And when I heard the cry,
Ugh.
I was so relieved. And then he peed on,
Chills.
yes, and then he peed on my husband. So
Even better.
better. But with this whole process, so Marcus had he did have a couple of brain bleeds. And so so I didn't get that like golden hour, right, with my son.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, it was 4 days until I got to hold him. And so, but I got to like touch his little cutie pie leg, you
Which
take
is
what you
the
can.
total 180 from what you had hoped, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's like,
Absolutely.
I mean, people hope for a vaginal hospital delivery and then they have to with an emergency C-section. And obviously, I'm not saying that that's any less hard than, anything else, but to
Absolutely
say
not.
that like this is really truly was a 180 from like
Yeah.
what you were hoping and expecting. And like, how
Yeah.
did that feel? How did you navigate that? And like, I mean, like you said, you got to hold his foot, right? Like, so you have to try and focus on the good things, right? Like, he's
Yes.
gonna be okay, he's getting better, like I'm okay, like those things, right? But at the same time, that doesn't like invalidate any of those like grief feelings towards
Not
this
at
birth that you
all.
were hoping for, you know?
Yeah. I definitely had frustration that I had to work through,
Yeah.
and the grief, like you said. Um, eh, and and it's like it was interesting because like I felt like I was holding multiple things at once, right? And like honestly, that's probably a really great way, or I guess it was the perfect way for me to end up like walking into motherhood was just this very like visceral experience of like holding multiple things at once. So there's the frustration and the grief and the sheer joy,
Right.
right? And there's this relief that like and like we're all on the other side of this,
Yeah.
right? And also the gratitude that I had literally the best professionals in the world who were taking care of my son. And it reminds me of on the when I've studied Kabbalah, there's the Divine Mother is represented by with a name called Bina. And Bina, as the Divine Mother, there's some qualities to that essence, which is both joy and sorrow. And so for me, it's basically just, and also like quiet pond. Like there was no, it was just like is and accepting is. And to have had that connection and contact, um, with the tree of life and with Bina through, for several times that I've like gone through Kabbalah, to be able to live that as I'm going through this process, helped me to just further embody like this, okay, and motherhood is, right? It's examining all of the things going on around you and assessing, right?
Right.
Accepting, finding the joy in it because children can't handle, right? A lot of the things that us as adults can because we've been here longer, right?
Right.
And they absorb everything and we have to guard them from a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, um, so Marcus ended up getting transferred down to Boston Children's, and then I followed him. He got medically transferred, and I was medically transferred. And he was in the NICU for 9 days. Um, and our hospital room for myself and my husband stayed with us, with me. Um, our hospital room kind of got known as like the party room or like the joy room because no matter like we were just relentless of like and everything will be okay with our son and let's keep going
Yeah.
and behind us was a team of support, right?
Oh my
From
gosh,
like
so much.
so much like we had, yeah, from like our local from our modern mystery school Boston team and friends and colleagues, like they were right there going, okay, what do you need? How can we help? Right. And a lot of that help showed up as yes, visiting us, but also like distance energy healings, which helped both myself and Brandon and especially Marcus, because even though, right, it's like, yes, we're right, we talk a lot about being physical body, right? We talk about how to emotionally process things and how we treat our mind, but we're also energy and we're also spirit. So there's this like your energy structure operates a certain way. And so by having these energy healings to help on top of, right, we had Western medicine helping us, and we also had these ancient energy healings to complement. And I think that that was an absolute game changer for my son because, you know, he ended up going through a 3-day process, cryotherapy, where his body temperature was lowered to slow the bleeding in his brain. So hopefully his brain could heal and we would have minimal, if they were like, hopefully no, right, effects from this. Maybe minimal, right? And if I can rewind for a moment, when we were first told the process that he had to go through because he didn't have the reflexes upon birth, um, when we were first told, all of these things that were going on for him and like what process they want to take him through, we were told by like one of the top neonatal neurologists in the country.
It's
And
crazy.
it's crazy. And
The
I'm like, and
doctors that we have here in
she,
Boston are just
she just
amazing.
happened to be there at
Right.
at that time, you know what I mean? And I was like, this is insane. And I'm so grateful. And she gave me her cell phone number. She's like, let me know. Like if you need anything or if you want, a second opinion on anything that you're talking, in his treatment. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. So at that point, I had subscribed myself to, okay, so maybe my son will dictate my entire life to be very, very different than I thought it was going to be. And I had to accept that
Right.
in that moment. And also my husband was like, but still have hope. Right. And I was like,
Yes.
okay,
In
yes.
tandem, just like you said,
In
juggling those
tandem.
those feelings. And I
Yes.
talk about just like juggling those feelings, like you said, as parenthood as a whole, right? Like it's okay to be like, I'm so overjoyed and happy I have a baby and sleep deprived and mad that I don't get to rest. Or like,
Yes.
I'm so happy that my baby wants to snuggle me and I get to breastfeed them. And I feel like it's not my body because they're taking so much from me and I don't
And
have
like
my own
getting
time.
touched
Like
out.
literally, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like this yes and idea is something that is something I talk about all the time. And
Yeah.
I think that you touched upon it perfectly, Um, Yeah, I mean that's crazy. And I love that you brought up the fact that he was not only getting like, hospital medicine, he was getting healing, he was getting literally like any type of positive intervention he could have been getting, he was getting. So like
Absolutely.
whoever, whatever you
Yes.
believe, he had it, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I love
Yep.
that because it does
Yeah.
like for you to say like my son had a brain bleed and had to go through this cryotherapy and was only in the NICU for 9 days. Like
Only in the NICU for 9 days.
not to invalidate the story, but to just prove the fact that like he really did have like the best people backing him. And I think that that also
Yes.
has to do with like the sheer amount of support and things that you set up prenatally, right? Like
Yes.
the whole
Yes.
purpose behind this podcast is really to like encourage people to, set up a postpartum plan, but also to, give people like different tips and tricks, but really like set up that plan for postpartum, not just this birth plan. And I think that
Right.
you have this true proof of like, yeah, no, if you set this up, like you have support systems and like they help, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that you're really just truly a poster example for that, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I felt really passionate about it, and that paid off because I
Yeah,
didn't realize I was going to need what I needed and that my son would need it,
right.
and and for people to show up for me and my husband in spades for our son, and then yes, for our own recovery too. It brought me to tears of gratitude, and it's like I'm kind of welling up a bit right now
I
because I'm
know.
just like it's so beautiful and I'm so grateful. And all we had to do was ask.
Yeah. People want to help. That's the thing. And I
People
think
want to
it's such
help.
a big thing that like people don't realize that like when your friends and your family are saying like how can I help? They're not just
Yeah.
asking so that they feel good about themselves. They're asking because they want to help. So
Yeah.
like if that be like can you literally just pick up a coffee and leave it on my doorstep? Like that people will
Oh my
do it.
God. Oh
That's
my
what people
gosh.
want, right? Like
Yes.
they would be so willing to do that for you. Like whatever it is that you have. And I think that also goes back to what we're talking about, like having options. So sometimes, like if you're on the other side of this story, right? Like, and you're trying to help someone, sometimes offering options. I had one post I saw online that was going around for a while, and it was like, my best friend just had a baby, and rather than asking her what she needs, I said, hey, I'm going to Target. What can I pick you up? Like, I'm dropping things off for
Yes.
you. Like, do you need
Mm.
paper towels and this and that? Like, I'm going to Costco. Like, what am I getting you? Not like, can I get you
Yeah.
something? It's like,
Right.
what am I getting you?
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And like, I'm gonna leave
Exactly.
it at your doorstep and that's it. But if you want me to come
Mhm.
in, I'd be happy to put it in the cupboard for you, right? Like, it
Yes.
doesn't need to be a equal exchange. Like life isn't a constant 50-50 with everybody, but it all
Right.
evens out at the end of the day, right?
It really does.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, and I'm just I'm so grateful because, so and then at this point, right, he's almost 11 months and he's hitting 12-month milestones, he's hitting 15-month milestones. Like he's just
It's
and we're
doing
like,
great.
yeah, he's doing
Oh,
great, and like we were told to keep an eye out on his speech development, and
yep.
like and he's up there doing mama mama da 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 da, and he'll get our inflections back and forth, so we ask him questions and he'll babble back in the
Babble back in the right. Yeah.
in the right inflection, and I'm like, whew, all right, you're gonna be chatting
Oh,
no
that makes my
time.
heart so happy. I'm so glad that you came on and to tell your story and to chat. I know that it was definitely a emotional ride for you guys,
Yeah.
and it was definitely a process, and reliving it and talking it through is probably like great, but also kind of tricky. So I appreciate you being so willing to come on and share that with people and, you know, yeah, just being able to like tell more stories and
Yeah.
getting people to start sharing their stories, I think is just so huge.
Thank you for asking me to share my story,
Of
because
course.
and because I also realized that when I was pregnant, um hearing hard pregnancy and birth stories was hard for me to hear,
Right.
right? And it's like, and it's totally understandable. And um and also now I'm on this side of it, and I hope that for those that can hear my story, they can hear the like the golden nuggets out of it,
Yeah.
you know. Um yeah, because
Yeah,
any way
it's
that
great to
can
hear it
help.
prenatally to like you said, get those gold nuggets. But even if you're listening postpartum, to find something that you can relate to.
Yeah,
People may not relate to like the exact experience you had, but
right.
same thing of like golden nuggets of like, oh yeah, I totally felt the navigating multiple emotions. Or like, I know my baby was in the NICU and that was really hard, but like everyone was like, oh, he was only there for X amount of days. So like it's hard to like navigate those two feelings. Like, how do they go
Yes.
hand in hand? And I think that
Mhm.
that's something that everyone experiences in whatever way. So I think probably everyone can relate to that in some manner. Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.